to melt into the walls, to stop existing in a world that only knew how to laugh at me. At home, my parents didn't know. They thought I was quiet because I was focused. They didn't see the nights I sat by the window, looking at the stars, whispering to myself in broken English, trying to practice words that refused to come out right. "Hello, my name is Alex," I would repeat softly, again and again, until tears blurred the words. Sometimes I would smile through them and say, maybe one day they will stop laughing. But deep inside, a small voice would whisper back, or maybe they never will. One afternoon, during English class, my teacher asked everyone to introduce themselves. My hands began to shake. My heart felt like it would burst out of my chest. One by one, everyone spoke with ease, their voices clear, their smiles wide. Then it was my turn. I stood up slowly, eyes fixed on the floor, and said, "And my name is Alex." The class burst into laughter. Someone clapped mockingly, another whispered, "He can't even say his name properly." The sound echoed in my mind long after it faded in the room. I sat down, pretending not to care, but inside, I felt like something had shattered, not my pride, because I didn't have much of it left, but my hope. That night, when I reached home, I didn't eat dinner. I locked myself in my room, stared into the mirror, and asked the reflection, "Why can't you be like them? Why are you always the joke?" The reflection stayed silent, like it always did, and maybe that silence was the only friend I truly had. Days turned into weeks, and I stopped trying. I would still go to school, still sit through classes, but I was no longer there. My body was present, but my soul had given up. I started avoiding eye contact, stopped answering questions, and lived in a world of my own, where dreams existed only in thoughts, never in action. Yet, no matter how much I tried to bury that small voice inside me, the one that used to whisper, "You're meant for more," it refused to die. It would return every time I saw someone speaking confidently, every time I heard someone say, "I did it." I wanted to know what it felt like to be proud of yourself. I wanted to know how it felt to speak without fear. But I didn't know where to start. I felt lost, like a bird that had forgotten how to fly. There was a pain that words couldn't describe, a sadness that lived in the quiet moments when everyone else was laughing. I envied their laughter because I didn't remember how mine sounded anymore. One rainy evening, as thunder echoed outside, I sat near the window, my notebook open but blank. I watched the raindrops slide down the glass, racing each other, and thought how similar they were to my tears, quiet, unnoticed, gone too fast. For a moment, I closed my eyes and imagined standing on a stage, speaking confidently, while people listened instead of laughed. The image felt impossible, but it gave me warmth. I whispered to myself, maybe one day. But then another thought came, cruel and cold, "You're not good enough." I wanted to argue with it, but I had no proof to fight back with. I hadn't done anything worth believing in. I laid my head on the notebook, and the only thing I could hear was the sound of rain mixing with the sound of my own breath, slow, tired, lonely. That night, before sleeping, I promised myself something I didn't fully understand yet. I said, "I'll try again. One last time." Maybe it was just a lie I told myself to survive the next day, but somewhere deep inside, that promise began to plant a seed. And though the world couldn't see it, a quiet fire had just begun to burn. That night when I whispered that promise to myself, I had no idea how much pain was waiting for me. The quiet fire inside me was real, but it was fragile, and every new day felt like a storm trying to put it out. I started waking up early, reading English words from old books I found in the library, trying to pronounce them properly, repeating sentences again and again until my throat hurt. Sometimes I would record my voice on my cheap phone, listen to it, and feel embarrassed at how broken it sounded. No one will ever understand me, I would think. Still, I tried again. I stood in front of the mirror, smiled awkwardly, and said, "My name is Alex. I can speak English." The mirror never laughed, and maybe that was why it became my best listener. Days went by like that, full of tiny victories no one saw and silent failures that only I felt. In school, I still sat alone. People still whispered. A boy named Ryan once said to me, "Alex, stop trying so hard. English is not for you." I smiled back, pretending his words didn't matter, but deep inside, they hit harder than any slap. That night I cried quietly into my pillow, afraid my parents might hear. I didn't want them to know their son was losing another battle. There were moments when I wanted to quit again, when the small voice inside me that said you're meant for more started to sound tired too. I began to wonder if that voice was even mine, or just a cruel echo meant to keep me from giving up completely. Every failure felt heavier. Every laugh from others sounded sharper. One day, during a group presentation, I froze. My mind went blank. The words that I had memorized all night disappeared. My teacher looked disappointed, and my classmates couldn't stop smiling behind their hands. When it ended, I walked out of class without saying a word. My chest hurt. My eyes burned. I found an empty room near the staircase and sat on the floor. For the first time, I said out loud, "Maybe they're right. Maybe I'll never be good enough." My voice cracked, and I hated the sound of it. It sounded weak, helpless, broken, exactly what they said I was. I hit my fist against the floor, not to hurt myself, but to remind myself that I still existed. That I still had something left inside, even if it was just pain. I stayed there until the bell rang, listening to the noise of other students walking out, their laughter echoing like ghosts of all the moments I failed to belong. At home, things weren't easier. My father wanted me to focus on practical things. English won't feed you, he said one evening when he saw me practicing. Work hard on something real. I nodded silently. He didn't understand that English wasn't just a language for me anymore. It was a symbol of every fear I had, every weakness I wanted to destroy. Learning it wasn't about grammar, it was about fighting the part of me that believed I was useless. But how could I explain that? I stopped talking about my dreams. I stopped talking much at all. My mother would ask if everything was okay, and I would smile, the kind of smile that lies just enough to make people stop asking questions. Yet every night, after everyone slept, I would sit at my desk, whispering sentences to myself, my breath fogging up the window. "I will not give up," I said once, and the reflection in the glass almost looked like it believed me. Then came the week of the annual speech competition. It wasn't mandatory, but when the teacher asked for volunteers, something inside me raised my hand before my brain could stop it. The class laughed immediately. "Alex? You?" Ryan said, almost choking on his laughter. "Bro, just don't embarrass us." The teacher smiled kindly and said, "If you want to try, go ahead." My palms were sweating, my stomach twisted, but I nodded. That night, I wrote my speech. It was simple, full of mistakes, but it was mine. I practiced every night until my voice cracked. I memorized every line until I could say it with my eyes closed. The day of the competition arrived, and my heart felt like it was carrying a storm. Standing backstage, I could hear the audience, laughter, whispers, footsteps. My name was called. I walked to the stage, my knees weak, my hands cold. The lights blinded me, and for a second, I forgot how to breathe. Then I remembered the mirror, the window, the nights I cried but kept going. I closed my eyes and said the first line. My voice trembled. Someone coughed. I continued. Each sentence felt like climbing a mountain barefoot, but I didn't stop. By the time I finished, the room was quiet. No applause. No laughter. Just silence. For a moment, I didn't know what that silence meant. Was it pity? Was it respect? I couldn't tell. I looked up and the teacher gave a small smile. It wasn't victory, but it wasn't defeat either. It was something in between, a small light in a long tunnel. I walked off the stage, and as I did, I heard one student whisper, "He actually finished it." It was such a small sentence, but it felt like the biggest achievement of my life. That night, I didn't cry. For the first time, I felt proud, even if no one else noticed. I looked at the stars again, and instead of feeling small, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I was finally learning how to shine. That night, as I stared at the stars, something inside me shifted. It wasn't loud or dramatic, it was quiet, almost peaceful, like the calm that comes before a storm. For the first time, I didn't feel like a joke or a failure. I felt like someone who had survived enough pain to finally understand it. I realized that no one was ever going to hand me the life I wanted. No teacher, no friend, no parent could do it for me. It had to be me. That thought scared me and freed me at the same time. I whispered to myself, you have to fight now, not for them, but for yourself. The next morning, I woke up before the sun, something I had never done before. The world was still half asleep, the streets empty, the sky pale. I ran until my lungs burned, until sweat mixed with the tears I didn't realize were still falling. For the first time, I wasn't running away from pain, I was running through it. Each step felt like a scream, every breath like a promise that I would never be that scared boy again. When I got home, I stood in front of the mirror. The reflection still looked tired, but there was something new in those eyes' fire. I said out loud, my name is Alex. I am not a failure. The words felt heavy but real. Every day after that, I built myself piece by piece. I practiced speaking, I read books I didn't understand. I watched English videos and repeated every line until my tongue stopped betraying me. Some days I failed badly, mispronounced words, forgot sentences, lost confidence. But I didn't stop. Every failure became a lesson, every mistake a step forward. Slowly, my voice began to change. It became steadier, clearer, stronger. And with every word I learned, I built a new version of myself. There were nights I cried again, yes, but not out of weakness, out of exhaustion, out of fighting battles no one could see. I was becoming something that scared me strong. At school, people noticed something different. The boy who once avoided eye contact now looked straight into their eyes. The one who used to walk with his head down now walked with quiet confidence. Some laughed, saying, "Look at Alex pretending to be smart." But this time, I didn't care. Their words didn't cut like they used to. They sounded small now, meaningless, like echoes from a world I had already left behind. I began helping others in class, sharing what little I had learned, and every time I explained something in English, even a single line, it felt like victory. My teacher noticed too. One day she said, "Alex, I've seen how hard you're working. Keep going." That simple sentence lit a fire in my heart brighter than any applause. It meant someone saw me not as a joke, but as a person trying to rise. One afternoon, as I sat alone under a tree near the schoolyard, Ryan walked past me. He looked at me for a moment and said, half smiling, "You've changed." I didn't reply, just nodded. He shrugged and walked away, but inside, I felt something powerful, not pride, but peace. I didn't need revenge or validation anymore. I was too busy building myself. That evening, I stayed back at school, standing in front of the empty classroom, speaking to the walls as if they were an audience. I practiced eye contact, tone, pauses. It was silly, maybe even crazy, but I didn't care. I was training not just my mouth, but my heart. I was teaching it not to shake every time someone doubted me. Weeks passed, and something strange began to happen. The same kids who once laughed started asking me for help. "Hey Alex, how do you say this word? Can you help me with my speech?" Every time they asked, I smiled quietly. Not because I wanted to show off, but because I remembered how it felt to be in their place, scared, lost, alone. Helping them made me stronger. It reminded me how far I had come. My teacher eventually selected me for an inter-school competition. When she announced my name, the class went silent. I saw their faces, shock, disbelief, curiosity. I smiled. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window again like I used to, but this time, the sky didn't look cold or distant. It looked open, endless, almost like it was listening. I whispered, "Thank you for not letting me give up." Maybe it was just the wind, but I swear it whispered back, "Not yet, Alex. There's more to come." The day of the competition arrived, and as I stood backstage, I remembered every insult, every laugh, every lonely night I had spent talking to myself in broken English. My heart was racing, but it wasn't fear, it was energy, alive, burning. When my name was called, I stepped into the light. The stage felt like the place I had been walking toward my whole life. I took the microphone, looked at the crowd, and said, "Good morning, everyone." My voice didn't shake. The silence in the room was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. I spoke, not perfectly, but passionately. Every line came from pain and persistence. By the time I finished, there was a strange silence again, not mocking, but powerful. And then, slowly, the clapping began. It grew louder and louder, and in that moment, I felt the world shift. I wasn't the boy they used to laugh at anymore. I was Alex, the one who didn't quit. The one who finally believed. That night, standing on the rooftop again, the wind against my face, I whispered, "This is just the beginning." That night when I whispered those words to the wind, I didn't know how true they would become. The beginning was only the first step of a road I hadn't yet seen, a road full of sleepless nights, aching days, and silent sacrifices that no one would ever clap for. But I kept walking, one small step at a time. Every morning I woke up before the sun, the air still cold, the world still asleep, and I repeated my promise, I will not stop. The sound of those words was stronger than coffee, stronger than fear. I studied, practiced, failed, and started again. Some days my voice felt weak, some days my body wanted to rest, but I had learned that progress doesn't come from comfort. It comes from pain, from pushing yourself when no one is watching. The same boy who once hid behind silence was now standing in front of classrooms, helping others speak, not because he was the best, but because he finally knew what it meant to try. Slowly, everything began to change. My grades improved. Teachers started noticing me. The principal once said, "You've come a long way, Alex." I smiled, but inside I whispered, "I'm just getting started." Years passed, and time polished me in ways I couldn't see. I learned not just English, but discipline, patience, and faith. Every failure had taught me something. Every rejection had built a layer of strength around my heart. I used to think life was about proving people wrong, but now I knew it was about proving yourself right. I stopped caring about who was watching. I focused on who I was becoming. One day, I received an email. I had been selected to speak at a national youth conference. My hands trembled as I read it. My heart raced, the same way it used to when I was scared, but this time, it wasn't fear, it was gratitude. I thought about the boy who couldn't say his name, the boy who cried into his pillow, the boy who almost gave up. That boy was still inside me, but now he was proud. I prepared for that speech for weeks, not to impress anyone, but to speak the truth that had lived inside me for years. The day of the conference came, and as I walked onto the stage, I saw hundreds of faces staring back at me. Cameras flashed, lights glowed, and for a second, I felt that same old nervousness. But then I remembered every night of pain, every whisper of "you can't," every tear that once fell without anyone knowing. I smiled and began to speak. There was a time, I said, when I couldn't even say my name in front of people. I was shy, scared, and broken. People laughed. But I learned something: no one can break you unless you give them the power to. The audience listened, silent, eyes locked on me. My voice was calm, clear, strong, not perfect, but real. I talked about failure, about how the world doesn't care about your excuses, only your effort. I spoke about pain being the birthplace of strength, about how belief is the only light that survives the dark. By the time I finished, I could feel my throat tighten with emotion. The hall was quiet for a second, and then, applause erupted, loud, endless, alive. I saw people stand up, clapping, smiling, cheering. I looked at the crowd and smiled, not because they were proud of me, but because I was proud of myself. For the first time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel invisible. I felt free. After the speech, people came to me, students, teachers, strangers, telling me how my story reminded them of their own struggles. One young boy, maybe 13 or 14, came close and said softly, "Sir, they laugh at me too." I looked at him and saw myself years ago. I placed my hand on his shoulder and said, "Then promise me one thing. Don't stop. Ever. They'll laugh now, but one day, they'll clap." The boy nodded and his eyes shined with the same fragile hope I once had. That night, when I went home, I stood in front of the mirror again. The same mirror that had once watched me cry, watched me fail, watched me whisper broken English to myself. I looked into it, smiled, and said, "We did it." The reflection smiled back, stronger, calmer, prouder. I turned off the lights, sat near the window and watched the city glowing in the distance, the same city that once laughed at me, now listening to my voice. I realized that victory wasn't about applause or awards. It was about the peace that comes when you finally become who you were meant to be. As I closed my eyes, I thought about everything I had lost and everything I had gained. The pain had taught me more than any success ever could. The laughter I once feared had become the soundtrack of my strength. The silence I once hated had become my home. And the fire that once started quietly inside me now burned bright enough to light others. I whispered one last time before sleep took me. They laughed when I started, but they stopped laughing when I finished. And with that, the boy who was once a joke finally became a legend.